It was a nightmare scenario when my asthmatic mom couldn't catch her breath at the neighborhood barbecue. Our power-hungry HOA president, Eleanor Hoffman, actually stole her inhaler as some twisted punishment for breaking petty rules. How could Eleanor possibly know my sweet, struggling mother was actually an undercover FBI agent investigating their corrupt organization? The flashing red and blue lights painted streaks across our curtains as I watched the ambulance carry Mum away, all because Eleanor Hoffman couldn't resist meddling over our garden gnome. Shaking partly from anger, partly from fear, I stood frozen in our driveway. 10 tense hours earlier, everything had seemed perfectly normal. In fact, I remember the exact moment Eleanor first set her sights on us. We'd just finished wrestling with the last of the unpacking boxes in our new Pinecrest Gardens home when a sharp, impatient knock interrupted our pizza dinner. There she stood, immaculate, in her spotless white pantsuit, a black notebook clutched tightly in her perfectly manicured hands. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she stated without a hint of a smile. "Your mailbox is non-regulation, 2 shades darker than permitted. Fix it by Friday." Mum, ever the peacemaker, politely invited her in for pizza. Eleanor eyed the cardboard box as if it harbored a disease. "I prefer to keep our interactions professional," she replied coolly, her gaze sweeping critically over our half-unpacked living room. "I'm the HOA president. You'll find all the rules in the welcome packet. There are many. That was just 3 months ago. Since that initial encounter, she'd written us up for a slew of supposed infractions, trash cans allegedly visible from the street. They weren't Christmas lights, lingering too long. It was January 2nd, a bird feeder deemed to attract pests, Mum's prized rose bushes growing half an inch too tall, and even my car supposedly leaking oil on the driveway. It absolutely wasn't. Each notice felt like a deliberate jab, a way to assert her dominance. Mum, who'd patiently taught kindergarten for 30 years before retiring last spring, tried desperately to make peace. She baked cookies for Eleanor, which were left untouched on her doorstep, invited her for tea, politely declined, and even offered to help with community landscaping projects. Ignored. Eleanor simply responded by increasing her nitpicking inspections of our property clipboard, always in hand. But what really seemed to get under Eleanor's skin was Norman, the cheerful garden gnome Dad Mark had given Mum on their last anniversary before his sudden heart attack. Norman sat happily beside our front steps, miniature fishing pole eternally poised. "It cheapens the aesthetic of Pinecrest Gardens," Eleanor declared sharply during her 4th visit in just 2 weeks. "The rules allow for tasteful lawn ornaments," Mum countered calmly, showing Eleanor the relevant page in the thick HOA handbook. "G. Norman stays." Even then, I noticed Mum's hand trembling slightly as she spoke. Undoubtedly, the constant stress was aggravating her asthma. At 62, the condition, which had been relatively mild for years, seemed to worsen significantly after Dad died. Yesterday marked the annual Pinecrest Gardens summer barbecue. Naturally, Eleanor had ominously announced a special meeting about community standards beforehand. As we arrived at the clubhouse, an uneasy feeling settled over me. Too many neighbors glanced our way before quickly averting their eyes. "Glad you could join us," Eleanor purred into the microphone as we found seats near the back. "I was just discussing property values and how certain residents seem determined to lower them." She then clicked to a PowerPoint slide. Unbelievably, it showed our house with Norman circled in angry red. "This," she announced grandly, gesturing towards the screen, "is exactly the kind of tackiness that drives away quality buyers." Mum stood up, her face flushed. "Eleanor, this isn't appropriate for a community event. The bylaws state, I maintain community standards," Eleanor interrupted, her voice hardening, "and your defiant attitude has been noted repeatedly." Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, though a few unfortunately nodded in agreement with Eleanor. That gnome was a gift from my late husband, Mum explained, her voice thick with emotion. I could hear the telltale wheeze starting in her chest. The first dangerous sign of an asthma attack. Your personal attachments aren't our concern, Eleanor snapped dismissively. Remove it or face escalating fines. Mum's breathing grew noticeably labored. She reached into her purse, fumbling for her essential asthma inhaler as she tried to speak. You're exceeding your authority, and you're being disruptive. Eleanor marched right over and snatched the inhaler from Mum's grasp before she could use it. Shocked gasps rippled through the room. Mum instinctively tried to grab it back, but Eleanor deftly stepped away. Return it when you learn some manners, she spat, her eyes cold. Mum's face went deathly pale as she visibly struggled for air. I leaped up, yelling at Eleanor to give the inhaler back. However, two of Eleanor's cronies, board members Greg and Brenda, who always rubber-stamped her decisions, moved swiftly to block my path. She needs that to breathe, I screamed, desperation rising in my throat. She needs to respect authority, Eleanor retorted callously, dropping Mum's lifeline into her designer handbag. Meeting adjourned. As people began to shuffle out, some casting concerned glances, others deliberately looking away, Mum crumpled to the floor. I shoved past Greg and Brenda, managing to catch Mum just before she hit the ground. Someone call 911, I shrieked, noticing with horror that Mum's lips were beginning to turn blue. Your mother suffered a severe asthma attack, Dr. Evans explained gently as we sat in the stark hospital consultation room hours later. If you hadn't gotten her here so quickly. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The terrifying image of Mom gasping for air while Eleanor casually walked away with her inhaler played on a horrifying loop in my mind. Can I see her? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Dr. Evans nodded. She's stabilized, but we're keeping her overnight for observation. She's been asking for her phone. I found Mum looking surprisingly alert in her hospital bed, though hooked up to monitors and receiving oxygen. Her first words, however, weren't what I expected. Sarah, did you bring my secure phone? The one in the locked drawer of my nightstand? Mum, you need to rest. I'm calling the police about Eleanor. No police, Mum insisted firmly, her gaze intense. Not yet. Get my phone first, please. Driving home felt surreal, the pounding rain on the windshield matching the frantic thumping in my chest. Adding insult to injury, a certified letter from the HOA was brazenly taped to our front door, left out in the rain, which ironically violated their own strict rules about proper mail delivery. Inside, the letter coldly demanded a $500 fine for disruptive conduct at a community event, and threatened legal action if not paid within 7 days. It bore Eleanor's imperious signature and the official HOA seal. Unbelievable. I tossed it onto the counter in disgust. In Mum's room, I found the small key exactly where she'd said, taped discreetly inside her worn copy of Pride and Prejudice. The locked drawer yielded a phone I'd never seen before and a small, unassuming notebook filled with dense financial records and cryptic codes. Back at the hospital, Mum was sitting up, looking physically better, but radiating a seriousness I'd never witnessed. Lock the door, she instructed quietly. Confused, I did as she asked. Mum, what is happening? We need to report Eleanor for assault at the very least. Sit down, honey. Mum's voice had shifted entirely. It was calmer, steadier, and held an authority that sent a shiver down my spine. There's something I need to tell you. She took the unfamiliar phone, entered a lengthy passcode, and made a call. Agent Catherine Reynolds reporting. Authorization code Lanyard Delta 47. I need to speak with Director Swanson. Yes, it's urgent. I gaped at my mother, my gentle retired kindergarten teacher mother, speaking in clipped professional tones I couldn't comprehend. Sir, my cover may be compromised, she continued. The subject has escalated to physical endangerment. Yes, she took my inhaler, which contains the tracking device. No, my personal identity is still secure, but we need to accelerate the timeline. Hanging up, Mum finally met my stunned gaze. Sarah, she began quietly, I'm not just a retired kindergarten teacher. It's complicated, but I've been with the FBI for 35 years, Financial Crimes Division. I managed a shaky laugh. Very funny, Mom. You taught Mrs. Peterson's kids, half the town knows you. I did teach, yes. That was my cover assignment for the last decade, she explained patiently. She reached into her hospital gown and pulled out a chain, bearing an official-looking badge I'd certainly never seen before. But this is who I really am. That's real. I reached out, tentatively touching the cool metal, feeling suddenly dizzy. Eleanor Hoffman, Mum continued, her voice low and urgent, has been running a massive money laundering operation through this HOA for years. I've been tracking interconnected transactions across 5 different homeowners associations. That's why we moved here after your father passed away. Dad, Mark knew, I whispered, reeling. Mum nodded, a flicker of old sadness in her eyes. Your father was my handler until he retired 5 years ago. We weren't supposed to fall in love, but we did. He stayed active as my unofficial support until his heart attack. The room seemed to spin. Everything I thought I knew about my quiet suburban family life had just been turned completely upside down. The asthma, I began trying to grasp onto something familiar, is real, Mum confirmed. Unfortunately, I've had it since childhood. But the inhaler Eleanor took contains a specialized recording and tracking device. It's been documenting her meetings and sensitive phone calls whenever I could plausibly be near her. By taking it, she hasn't just assaulted me. She's made a critical mistake. She's stolen federal property. A soft knock interrupted us. Mum quickly tucked the badge away and nodded for me to answer. 2 individuals in sharp business attire stood outside, a tall black woman and a younger man with glasses. Agents Davis and Miller, the woman stated quietly, discreetly, flashing her credentials. We need to speak with Agent Reynolds. They entered, closing the door firmly behind them. Catherine, we've been monitoring the situation, Agent Davis confirmed, her voice low. Director Swanson has authorized immediate action based on the medical threat and the subject's possession of the device. Eleanor scheduled an emergency HOA board meeting for tomorrow morning. I interjected, remembering the purpose of the earlier gathering. To discuss our ongoing violations, she sent out a notice right before taking Mum's inhaler. The agents exchanged a significant glance. Perfect timing, Mum murmured. The quarterly HOA fees were collected last week. If her pattern holds, the dirty money will move tomorrow right after that meeting. We'll have a full team in place, Agent Miller added, adjusting his glasses. Your hospitalization, while unfortunate, actually strengthens our case significantly. It adds assault and endangerment charges to the financial crimes. What do you need me to do? I asked, still struggling to reconcile the image of my cookie-baking, rose-tending mother with this composed federal agent calmly discussing takedown operations. Mum reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Go home. Act normal, scared, upset, about me, angry at Eleanor. Attend the meeting tomorrow and record everything on your phone. We'll have agents nearby, inside and out, but we need you to be our eyes and ears inside that room initially. Won't Eleanor be suspicious when you're not there? Mum gave a grim smile. Oh, I'll be there. Dr. Evans is actually Agent Evans. I'll be discharged first thing in the morning, just in time. Driving home felt surreal. This time, I noticed them. 3 black SUVs parked discreetly on different streets leading into our neighborhood. At home, even Norman the garden gnome seemed to wink knowingly in the soft glow of the porch light. Had he been part of this elaborate charade too? Sitting numbly on our couch, I pulled out old photo albums, suddenly viewing my parents' entire life through a completely new, bewildering lens. Dad's government accounting job, Mum's teaching position that always seemed to require moving districts every few years, the professional conferences they often attended separately. Then, something snagged my attention in a faded family beach photo, Dad's watch. It looked identical to the unusual sturdy model I'd seen on Agent Miller's wrist earlier. Had I been surrounded by FBI agents by secrets my entire life without a clue? Just after midnight, my phone buzzed, with a text from an unknown encrypted number, Operation Active at 0900. Be ready. I stared out the window at our deceptively quiet suburban street, heart pounding, wondering what fireworks were about to erupt when Eleanor Hoffman discovered she hadn't just bullied a sick older woman. She'd stolen crucial federal property from a seasoned FBI agent who'd been meticulously building a case against her for months. Listen carefully, Mum whispered urgently, gripping my arm as we stood just outside the community center the next morning. The air crackled with tension. I need you to act surprised, maybe even a little confused when I reveal who I am. This operation is bigger than just Eleanor's petty power trip. Inside, every seat was taken. Neighbors whispered and pointed as Mom and I entered. Eleanor presided at the center table, flanked by her loyalists Greg and Brenda. Mum's inhaler sat brazenly in front of her like a trophy. Late as usual, Eleanor smirked pointedly, checking her diamond-studded watch. We've called this emergency meeting to address the Reynolds' ongoing violations and yesterday's disruptive behavior. Mum shuffled forward, shoulders hunched, playing the frail asthmatic to perfection. I had to bite my lip, astonished at her acting prowess. For the past 8 months, I'd genuinely watched her seem to struggle on stairs, sometimes even carrying a small oxygen tank on bad days. All of it apparently an elaborate performance. Before we begin, Eleanor continued, tapping a thick stack of papers. I want everyone to see the documented proof of the Reynolds' 17 violations this year alone. She projected photos onto the wall. Our non-regulation mailbox, Mum's slightly overgrown rose bushes, even our perfectly harmless Halloween decorations from last October. As you can see, she declared dramatically, these people have no respect for our community standards, and yesterday, Ms. Reynolds had the audacity to orchestrate a medical episode during my address simply to draw attention away from her blatant disregard for the rules. Gasps filled the room. Even some of Eleanor's usual supporters looked distinctly uncomfortable this time. You stole my medication, Mum wheezed, her voice trembling convincingly. I could have died. I confiscated a disruptive prop, Eleanor corrected haughtily, holding up the inhaler for all to see. If you were truly that sick, you would have gone directly to a hospital, not attempted to embarrass me publicly. Mum's hand trembled as she reached into her purse. I steeled myself, knowing what was coming next. I did go to the hospital, Mum said, her voice suddenly ringing with unexpected strength and clarity. She pulled out her FBI badge, holding it high. And now, Eleanor Hoffman, I'm placing you under investigation. The room erupted in confused shouts and murmurs. Simultaneously, 2 agents, Davis and Miller, entered briskly from a back door, their dark suits and serious expressions commanding attention. This is Agent Catherine Reynolds, announced Agent Davis, her voice cutting through the noise. She's been leading our multi-jurisdictional investigation into financial irregularities and potential corruption in HOA operations across 3 counties. Eleanor's face contorted with disbelief and rage. "This is absurd. She's lying. She's a retired teacher." Mum straightened to her full height, all traces of perceived weakness vanishing instantly. "That inhaler you so proudly displayed," Mum stated, her voice steady and resonant, "contains a federal recording device that has captured every incriminating conversation we've had for months, including your admission yesterday about using HOA funds to help finance your vacation home in Aspen. You can't record me without my knowledge. That's illegal," Eleanor shrieked, finally looking panicked. "Not when it's part of a sanctioned federal investigation into suspected money laundering," Mum replied calmly. "We have bank records showing over $200,000 in resident fees diverted to personal accounts linked to you and your associates. We have digital evidence of falsified financial reports submitted to regulatory bodies. And now, thanks to your theatrical display of power yesterday and today, we also have you on record admitting to deliberately endangering a federal agent by withholding necessary medical equipment." Eleanor lunged instinctively for the inhaler on the table, but Agent Miller was faster securing an evidence bag. "This is federal property, ma'am." Greg and Brenda started to edge away from Eleanor, their faces pale. Mum shook her head slightly. "Don't bother trying to distance yourselves now. Your digital signatures are all over the fraudulent transfer documents too." Suddenly my neighbor Linda stood up, trembling but resolute. "They fined me $2,000 when my husband was deployed overseas because our grass grew slightly too long while I was away at my mother's funerals." This opened the floodgates. A torrent of voices called out, recounting years of injustices, excessive fines for trivial matters, arbitrary rule changes, selective enforcement, and intimidation tactics. "Quiet her!" Eleanor screamed, slamming her fist on the table, her composure finally shattering. "This community would fall apart without my leadership. These people are trying to destroy everything we've built." Mum calmly opened a laptop brought in by Agent Miller and projected financial records onto the wall screen. "Residents of Pinecrest Gardens," she addressed the room. "These are your HOA financial statements for the past 3 years. The highlighted entries clearly show funds being transferred to shell companies registered to Mrs. Hoffman and her known associates, Mr. Gregson and Ms. Brewer." Eleanor knocked over her chair as she scrambled to her feet. You'll regret this. My husband plays golf with Senator Wilson." "Senator Wilson's office is well aware of our investigation," Mum countered smoothly. "In fact, his office has received numerous independent complaints regarding predatory HOA practices allegedly originating from this and associated communities." As Agents Davis and Miller, along with 2 uniformed officers who had entered discreetly, led a sputtering Eleanor, Greg, and Brenda outside, neighbors immediately surrounded us, buzzing with questions, relief, and thanks. Mum held up her hand for quiet. "There's something else you all need to know," she said gravely. "Pinecrest Gardens was just one target. We've uncovered evidence of similar schemes operating within at least 12 communities across the state. It appears Eleanor's group has been systematically using these residential associations as fronts for moving money from less legitimate business ventures. Tomorrow's newspapers will likely carry the initial details." While the room buzzed with this shocking revelation, I finally found my voice as Mum and I began walking home amidst the lingering police presence. "Why didn't you tell me any of this, Mum?" She squeezed my hand tightly. "Partly because your genuine reactions, your frustration, your worry, helped sell my cover story completely. I couldn't risk Eleanor suspecting anything, especially with her level of paranoia." She paused at our driveway, looking at our little house with new eyes. "Also, honestly, Sarah, I wasn't sure initially how deep this conspiracy went. I needed to protect you above all else." I stared at this incredible woman I thought I knew, So the asthma, real unfortunately, she sighed, rubbing her chest reflexively. I've had it since childhood. I just exaggerated the symptoms considerably for the assignment. The Bureau thought my condition actually made me a more convincing undercover agent who would suspect someone who seemingly can barely climb a flight of stairs without wheezing. Just as we reached our front door, Mum's secure phone rang again. Her expression darkened instantly as she listened intently. "We need to go back," she said urgently, turning towards me. "They found something else, something significant, in the community center basement." Flashlight beams sliced through the darkness as we hurried back towards the community center. Yellow crime scene tape now blocked the main entrance. Mum flashed her badge at the officer standing guard, who quickly lifted the tape for us. "What did they find?" I whispered as we descended a set of narrow, dusty stairs I never even knew existed beneath the main hall. "Documents," Mum replied tersely. "Lots of them. And equipment." The basement smelled damp, musty, and long unused. Metal shelves lined the cold concrete walls, cluttered with forgotten holiday decorations and broken pool furniture. However, several FBI agents were focused intently on a section of the back wall that had been cleverly moved aside, revealing a hidden, climate-controlled room. Catherine, good timing, a man in a rumpled suit, clearly another agent, waved us over. "Your hunch was right. This goes way beyond local HOA corruption." Inside the hidden space, the scale of the operation became chillingly clear. Stacks upon stacks of official-looking files reached the ceiling. Sophisticated computer equipment hummed ominously in one corner, set up next to what looked disturbingly like a professional-grade printing and laminating setup. "Identity theft, Mum asked, immediately pulling on a pair of latex gloves offered by an agent. "And much more," the agent replied, handing her a thick folder. "We've already found preliminary evidence linking Eleanor's core group to at least 3 known criminal organizations operating across state lines. They've certainly been using the HOA fees to launder illicit cash, but it appears they've also been manufacturing high-quality false identities, possibly using unsuspecting residents' information as templates." My stomach plummeted. "You mean they've been stealing our identities, our neighbors' identities?" "Not just stealing them potentially," another agent called out from behind a bank of computer monitors. "They've been selling complete identity packages. New names, fabricated credit histories, detailed backstories. Top-tier stuff, sophisticated enough to fool most standard security checks." Mum opened the folder the first agent had given her and gasped audibly. Inside were near-perfect replicas of passports, driver's licenses, and social security cards. The photos belonged to people I recognized instantly from our neighborhood gatherings, but the names were all different. "They've been using our community as a testing ground," Mum breathed, her face grim. Creating and refining fake identities based on real people, then selling the finished products to criminals on the open market." Suddenly it clicked. That's why Eleanor was so obsessed with taking pictures at every single community event, I realized aloud. She wasn't just documenting supposed violations, she was gathering facial data for the fake IDs. Mum squeezed my shoulder, a look of dawning understanding on her face. "And why she absolutely hated your garden gnome so much. Your security camera, hidden inside it, might have inadvertently captured her clandestine, late-night visits to this basement." I blinked in confusion. "Wait, you knew about my gnome camera? Who do you think subtly suggested that particular brand with the enhanced night vision when you were shopping online?" Mum winked, a flash of the undercover agent peeking through. "I needed extra localized surveillance near the house, but couldn't risk installing official bureau equipment without potentially blowing my cover." An agent shouted from another corner. "Got it. We've cracked some of the encrypted financial files. Looks like digital transactions, laundered money trails going back at least 3 years. Mum moved quickly to examine the computer screen, her expression growing even more serious. This is bigger than we initially thought. These payments trace back to shell companies registered in 7 different countries. Is that why the FBI got involved initially? I asked, finally understanding the scope. This seems way beyond typical HOA issues. Mum nodded grimly. We started receiving anonymous tips about highly unusual financial patterns emerging from several seemingly unconnected suburban communities. Small HOAs suddenly purchasing exorbitant security systems, obscure landscaping companies being paid triple the market rates through HOA accounts, classic money laundering indicators. But we never expected to uncover a sophisticated multi-state identity theft and forgery operation running parallel to it. Outside, more official vehicles were arriving, their lights flashing silently in the gathering dusk. Residents had begun to gather cautiously on the street, watching in stunned silence as agents carried out box after box of evidence from their supposedly innocuous community center. Linda appeared at my side, her face pale. Is it true Sarah was Eleanor really stealing our information? Before I could formulate an answer, a sudden commotion erupted near one of the police cars, parked down the street. Incredibly, Eleanor had somehow managed to slip her handcuffs and was making a desperate attempt to run. 2 officers quickly tackled and recaptured her, but not before she locked eyes with me across the lawn, her face a mask of pure venom. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice carrying clearly in the tense silence. "They'll come for all of you. When they discover their entire operation is compromised, they won't stop." Mum stepped forward swiftly, positioning herself between me and the struggling Eleanor. "Who will come? Eleanor, give us names, cooperate, and maybe we can offer you some protection." Eleanor let out a harsh, chilling laugh that sent shivers down my spine. "You think I'm the mastermind? Please, I'm just the local manager. There are 50 communities just like this one across the country, maybe more. As they finally secured a struggling, shouting Eleanor in the back of the police car, Mum pulled me aside urgently. "We need to talk seriously about your safety, Sarah. This case has just expanded significantly, and Eleanor's threat, even in desperation, has to be taken seriously." Back home, amidst the controlled chaos of FBI agents securing our house as a potential secondary crime scene, Mum made a series of intense, low-voiced calls while I numbly tried to process everything. Our quiet, rule-obsessed neighborhood had been an operational hub for international crime. My unassuming mother was a highly skilled federal agent, and somewhere out there, very powerful, dangerous people were undoubtedly furious that their lucrative operation had been exposed. "Pack a bag," Mum instructed curtly, hanging up the phone. "Just essentials for a few days. We're leaving now." "But what about our house, our neighbors?" "Protection teams are being assigned to every potentially affected household in the neighborhood," she explained quickly, already filling her own suitcase with practiced efficiency. "But you and I need to go to a secure location immediately. Eleanor's bosses, whoever they are, will figure out very quickly that I'm the agent who successfully infiltrated their network." My hands trembled as I grabbed photo albums and my laptop. "Where are we going?" "Witness protection temporarily," she replied, handing me a brand new unopened burner phone. "This is secure. Your old phone, your computer, they stay here for analysis." A sharp knock at the front door made us both freeze. Instinctively, Mom drew a sleek handgun from a hidden holster I never knew she possessed and approached the door cautiously. Peeking through the peephole, she relaxed slightly. "It's Agent Stone," she called softly to me, opening the door. The tall, no-nonsense agent from earlier entered quickly. "We need to move now," Agent Stone urged. "We've intercepted encrypted communications discussing the Pinecrest breach. They know who you are, Catherine. They know about your daughter." Within minutes, we were being ushered into an unmarked sedan, speeding away from the only neighborhood I'd known for the past year. As the familiar streetlights flashed by, Mom reached over and squeezed my hand tightly. "I'm so sorry I had to lie to you for so long, Sarah," she said softly, her voice filled with a mix of relief and regret. "This assignment was supposed to be relatively simple: gather evidence of local financial crimes, build a solid case against the immediate HOA corruption. I never anticipated it would unravel into something this vast, this dangerous. Will we ever be able to come back?" I asked, watching our house, our life disappear around a corner into the night. "Yes," she promised, her gaze determined. "We will come back. But first, we need to help the Bureau dismantle this entire network piece by piece." And 6 months later, we stood in our driveway once more. The house looked exactly as we'd left it, though the garden had predictably grown a bit wild. New, more visible security cameras surveyed the street, less discreetly hidden than my little gnome warrior had been. The subsequent investigation and trial had dominated national news for weeks. FBI uncovers massive criminal network operating through suburban homeowners associations. Eleanor Gregg Brenda and several higher-ups implicated through the recovered data received lengthy federal sentences. Eleanor's truly mysterious bosses were still being actively hunted by international agencies, but their vast US-based operation had been critically crippled. Our neighbors, fully briefed within security limits on the truth behind our sudden departure and return, welcomed us back with a warm, genuine block party. The newly elected HOA board, now thankfully led by Linda, had established one simple, overriding principle: be kind, be reasonable. "So what will you do now, Catherine?" Linda asked Mom, as we enjoyed hamburgers in the very same community park where the whole nightmare had publicly begun. "Actually retire," Mum laughed, patting her real non-bugged inhaler, which she still needed occasionally. "My asthma, the real kind, not the pretend kind, isn't getting any better. And honestly, chasing international criminals is definitely a young agent's game." I smiled, watching her chat easily with neighbors who now looked at her with newfound respect and a touch of awe rather than pity or irritation. My mother, the undercover kindergarten teacher, had inadvertently taught me the most vital lesson of all: never ever judge someone solely by appearances or assumptions. You truly never know the battles they might be fighting or the secrets they might be keeping. And as for Norman the garden gnome, whose hidden camera had played its own small part, we gave him a place of honor right by our front door, a quirky, constant reminder that sometimes the smallest, most unassuming things and people can offer the greatest, most unexpected protection. This story serves as a potent reminder that appearances can be profoundly deceiving. The quiet neighbor, the retiree, the person struggling with a visible ailment, might possess hidden strengths, depths, and purposes we could never guess. Conversely, those who project power, authority, and rigid adherence to rules might be masking deep corruption and insecurity. It urges us to look beyond the surface, practice empathy, and question assumptions, because the reality of people's lives and the dynamics within even the most ordinary-seeming communities can be far more complex and extraordinary than we imagine. It also highlights how unchecked, petty tyranny in small settings can sometimes be a symptom of much larger, more dangerous underlying issues. What do you think about Catherine's double life? Could you ever suspect something like this in your own neighborhood? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more compelling stories.